Perfect. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's panel discussion on how to strategize transferable skills in job searching for international students. This is Luki. I'm from the Grad Affairs office, and then all of you should have certain level of communication with me at this moment. So welcome to join us. So today I have two fantastic panelists join here with me. One is Karen Single from Com Career Service. Another one is alumnus, fantastic alumnus. I just love her. Greta Tang, who graduated from the M.S Public Relations programs a year ago. She graduated in January 2022. So without further ado, let me just move forward and let our panelists introduce themselves to you. Then I'm going to start our panel today.
Okay, so good morning, everybody. Glad you're here with us this bright sunny morning. So I'm Karen Single. I am a career advisor in the Com Career Services. You can find my appointments on Handshake. I'm available to speak with you on any topic related to your career goals, internship or job search, resumes, cover letters, LinkedIn profile, communicating, anything, your interview, mock interviews. But more importantly, my goal is to have everybody working on building their professional relationships. So please get on my schedule. Happy to work through what is individually your experience. Today's session is going to be an overview, but happy to meet with you one-on-one for your unique situations.
Greta, please.
Morning, everyone. My name is Greta, and I graduated BU Com with Master of PR in January 2022. And I am currently the PR and IR manager at Yige Cloud Technology. We are a public company specializing in large and heavy items in the furniture industry, and we are a B2B platform marketplace from a global perspective. And before this position, I worked as a PR coordinator at Highling Digital Solutions, which is the biggest independent advertising agency in the APAC region. And while I was in Com, I was the staff writer at the Communicator, and I had an internship with Community of 100. Really happy to be here and to discuss my background and experience with you guys.
Thank you guys so much. I know that today's topic is about how to strategize and then fully utilize our transferable skills in previous internships and experiences. So I will move to Karen, and then Karen's going to have everything to share with you.
Great, thank you. So the purpose today is to talk about transferable skills as a strategy for aligning your past experience with the requirements and expectations of your future employment. The most significant tool is to accomplish this is your resume. It serves as a bridge. So alignment is accomplished by breaking down past experiences into what we call skills and skill sets that you've developed through all the different past experiences that you've had. Future employers value what you can do for them in their business environment. So they're looking to see what you're going to bring with you as a candidate in terms of the tools that you have to be successful in their space. So the goal is to have your bullet statements lead with and highlight your skills and skill sets. You want to make it as easy as possible for the readers to scan your resume and see that bullet and see those values right next to that bullet. And especially when transitioning to a new industry or a job type, you really want the emphasis on what is common from your background, which is most often your skills and skill sets, which is why we call these transferable skills. So as you can see on the slide, there are some ways of preparing yourself so that you can identify and then use your transferable skills. So I'm going to talk through these on a couple of slides coming up. So researching and identifying, you really do need to know what you possess. So I really encourage you to do a lot of reflection on your own, with a colleague, with an advisor, with me, to really take all of your experiences and break it down into those skill sets. I think of it as a puzzle. Right now, you are a complete puzzle for who you are today. But that was made up of a lot of pieces that came together over these past years of your life. So we want to identify all those different puzzle pieces and pull them out so that you have access to them to put them back together to whatever new picture you want to form for your future goals, okay? So that's a big part of looking at how do you identify your skills. We also then talk about how to set those up in your resume and how to use the job description to know which ones are necessary and that are the expected skills on your resume when the employer is reading it. So we can go to slide 2. All right, so this is a little bit about talking about the transferable skills. How do you learn what the industry or the job type is looking for? Scan all the different jobs. Use the Indeed.com job boards. Look at the types of industries. Look at the job titles in those industries. Collect them. Make lists of the most common responsibilities, requirements, and skill sets. And you'll start understanding what your future employers, whether it's for an internship or a job, are going to be looking for on your resume. Okay? Speak with people. This ties into building your professional relationship as well. But speaking with someone who's doing what you want to do in the future can give you some insight into the day-to-day activities, and they can share with you what they believe are the skills that help them be successful. So this adds to your skill list, helps you identify what you want to bring from your past into your resume to help you get to your future. And speaking with people adds to your relationship community. We do talk a lot about vocabulary and phrases from the job descriptions, partly because of applicant tracking systems where the computer is looking for keywords to reach a certain matching percentage so that the computer will pass you on to a human for review. That is happening for a lot of businesses, but not every business. But it should be something you're aware of in terms of, formulating your resume, bringing those phrases in, looking for synonyms, but always being aware that you don't change your resume to fit a job description if it's misleading to what your background really is. We always want to be truthful, okay? Slide 2, please. So this is kind of what I'm talking about in terms of a job description. So on the left, that's actually a job description. What I do is I go through and highlight what's important, and the employers spend a lot of time on this. So this is important to them, and they are giving you everything you need to know. So in the highlights, you can see there's different things that I've identified. And then on the right, I've put it into categories of where these things might fall in terms of skill sets. So right away, you can see that this job description really values research and analytical skills. So you want to make sure that that is a significant part of your resume, thinking about all the different ways that you've done research or analytics. Your experiences can be paid, unpaid, part-time, internships. We can even talk about projects if they're their appropriate type of project. But this is what I call dissecting a job description to help you see what it is that they value, and then to bring it into the details of how are you going to communicate that from your background in the terms that they can understand because it's relevant and important to them. So the big categories for this particular job description: research analytics, providing thoughtful recommendations. So being in a role where you have expressed opinion, done a pitch, provided a report that informs based on data-driven. They also want some creativity, and they want somebody who has collaboration. So even if your background is fairly young, maybe you don't have as much experience, you can still look at how to highlight these higher level categories and present yourself as somebody who's aligned with this particular job description. Okay, so slide 3, please. All right, so here's my big reminder. You know, when we talk about aligning with job descriptions and using keywords and so on and so forth from the job description, always please remember, do not alter the truth of your background, because that is something that is going to be difficult to talk your way out of or live your way out of if you get hired based on something you don't actually have the skill sets for. So be careful about that. We do talk about synonyms. So look for, if you use the word manage for a particular thing, but they say lead, consider changing it to lead, because their applicant tracking system has that word because that's what's in the job description. And it doesn't alter the statement on your resume. And so we do talk about synonyms or means the same as in terms of phrasing, okay? As we just did, we looked at some of the hard skills, but you can look at the soft skills on a job description. Often it's the paragraph above responsibilities where they talk about the culture or what the department is or the department's goals or the type of people that the position would be working with. You can learn a lot about the soft skills, and to complement that, you can either build that into a summary on your resume or you can build it into your cover letter if that is allowed, if they're asking for you to do a cover letter, okay? Technically, skills section is not where you would put soft skills. Skills have definitely become more of a hard skill area, your technical language, equipment, software, procedures, things like that. But you can still integrate some soft skills in your bullets when you can also do quantification or qualification. So achieved 80% customer satisfaction due to strong interpersonal skills. Okay, so you can build some of it in sometimes depending on your background and what the job is looking for. But keep your skills section to more of the harder skills. Also, skills is a great place to put the keyword match. So if they're asking for Adobe, if they're asking for statistical tools, if they're asking for types of editing equipment, skills is a great place to put that to make sure those keywords are being mapped to the job description, okay? Probably the hardest thing around preparing your resume specifically for a job description is not putting in everything. This is definitely where I spend most time with the students. If you put in everything, it makes it harder for the reader to understand whether or not you fully understand the priorities of their job. They also wonder, do you understand and are you prepared to make this commitment? Or are you kind of introducing the other things you hope you want to do? So in this case, less is more, but it doesn't have to be like a lot less. We just want to make sure that you're not adding information that could lead a reader to misinterpret your interest, your motivation, your intentions, your understanding. So I do ask that when you go through this process, you look to keep things more relevant to the specific job description. And that's because relevance is compelling. They are searching through hundreds, thousands of applicants, and they are risking a lot of money because it's expensive to hire. So they want to know that the time they're taking to identify you, to interview you, to bring you on has the highest probability of success for them and for you. So keeping yourself aligned, being relevant, demonstrating understanding for their needs by the way you put your application together will help them see you as a very viable, relevant candidate, okay? And is there one more? Yep. So kind of bringing it all together, a student gave me permission to share this. So this was the job description he was working with. And we had highlighted it the way I showed in the previous slide. And he had his resume and I provided some follow-up. And my edits or recommendations are in the blue. So you can see that most of what I'm talking about is just fine-tuning what he already has to just align a little bit better with the actual job description. So for example, the first one where I say include description terms of production process for keyword matching. Okay, so in the second paragraph, the first line, the job description clearly states understanding of the development, pre-production, production, and post-production process. The gentleman wasn't wrong. His first bullet certainly indicates that he has those abilities, but to really help get this resume through the applicant tracking system or to catch the eye of a human reader, use those terminologies that they use. They know this job description. This is what's triggering their connection when they read your resume. So this is a great opportunity for him to rework that bullet and bring in specifics from the job description. Okay. Kind of the same thing for the next one, include terms from description for keyword matching. So for this one, if you look at just below that first one, build pitch decks, write log lines, show descriptions. Are there things from this particular position that they can add? Number 3, description says researched and connected with storytellers, a way to include connecting with talent. And he has it. Schedule shoots and set up filming with talents and crew. But it's not emphasized. He's emphasizing scheduling, a skill of scheduling. He's not emphasizing his ability to engage with talent, which is a big piece of what this job is. So this is just a little bit of an example. I'm really appreciative of the student who gave me permission to share this. A little bit of an example of how I would be working with you and supporting you until you get more comfortable doing this on your own. Okay. And that's kind of what we mean through the process of understanding transferable skills. You are a complete picture, but you're made up of a lot of different pieces that have come together to make you who you are today. Now you have a picture of yourself in the future, whether it's the internship or your future job. And you need pieces to be realigned a little differently to look like that person in the future. So break yourself down into those individual pieces, pull out the ones that have the most relevance, alignment to the future you, work through your resume, work through your LinkedIn profile, bring this into your preparation for your interviews, and reconstruct yourself so that somebody who's reading it doesn't know you, but they know their needs, they know their job description, can review your materials quickly and very immediately identify the connection, because you want your resume to get you that interview. It doesn't have to answer every question. You just want it to get you to the interview. So leaving a little bit to their curiosity is a good thing. The only way they're going to get that information is to talk to you. So that's my introduction to transferable skills and how to use the resume and an example of what we can work with in our one-on-one sessions.
Thank you, Karen. It's really helpful. I know some of you went to my panel discussion before that I did. It's a little bit different compared to what I used to do before, because Karen is so knowledgeable and has so rich experiences in all this knowledge sharing. So I just want her to just give us some examples and really look into the details on how we should incorporate certain parts from our previous experience into our resume and moving forward to stand up during the interview. If you have more questions, just wait a little bit, and then we will have this Q&A part at the very end. Now I'm going to move to our next panelist, Greta. So today I'm going to discuss and then speak with Greta about her own experience, and then you can bring whatever Karen shared with you as a knowledge base, and then now we move to the very practical experiences part. And then Greta, like I mentioned to you, she graduated from public relations program. I know we have a few advertising and PR students this morning, and you all have the same length of programs. You all have the same length of optional practical training after you graduate. You all face the similar level of challenging while on your job searching after you graduate. So today, let's just talk more. And then if you have any questions, then feel free to just pump it up after we're done this part. So Greta, back to you. Let's just think about back to the beginning while you're just about to graduate. So how did you find and search for the offer? And I mean your very first offer full-time after you graduate from PR program.
Well, upon graduation, I actually started applying for full-time position in around October and November 2021. And I created an Excel sheet with how many positions that I applied to. I included their names, my application status, the process, how many stages of interviews, and if I was invited to the next stage, etc. So by doing this, I will have a bigger picture of how I am doing and what are my next steps. And also, I just needed to remember every efforts I made in order to, improve myself. And at the time, I got to the final round of couple of positions. Some really stood out to me. But what I did keep in mind was that how was that position will benefit my H-1B application moving forward. As you know, most of the communication and PR related positions, they don't typically sponsor international students because they do and they have the money and energy to hire a native speaker. So what is the reason of hiring an international students that will require an extra time and effort? So at the time, I just realized that I have to know my niche, that I will have to know what stood out to me among any other competitors in this position. And also after talking to Lou, and Lou also reminded me that when I search on LinkedIn, on Indeed, I just type the keyword Mandarin marketing because, having a bilingual language skill is really something that stood out as a competitor, as a job applicant in the US. And by doing that, I successfully secured a couple of positions, full-time positions that are willing to sponsor my H-1B and are willing to go through the lottery and also cover my all H-1B and attorney fee for me, which is also really important for me at the moment. So that was basically how I ended up with my first full-time offer in LA as a PR coordinator in the agency. And in terms of my tips for job searching and impress the future employers, I think, well, it is true that many international students, we don't have what the native speakers, they have the ability and some English pronunciation because we are not a native speaker, but our role requires a really high skills of communication level. But I think at the time, I think we can transfer our skills. The bottom line is you have to tell your story clearly, be confident, don't be nervous, and don't be stressed out because they can tell if you're shaking, if your smiles are fake. And I'd say is to practice more and to have multiple rehearsals during the interview is necessary. So I think that's basically my tips for having the interviews with US employers.
Great. I think that Excel sheet is very helpful. At least I know that students send up, my God, hundreds of applications, and then turns out in the end they forgot which company they already applied to, and then they just forgot because there's so many. So having a Excel sheet and then summarize everything, and then also make that Excel sheet serve as a tracking document for you, and then give maybe one or two contact persons info, a linking profile, that would be much easier for you to get a hold of the entire process. And then also, the rehearsal, I cannot agree with you more. Rehearsal and rehearsal and rehearsal. You just need to practice makes perfect, and then don't be afraid. If your English is not a native language, but you have bilingual background, just use all these things as your strengths. Thank you. Let's move to the next part. I know you've been working for almost like more than a year so far in this stage and for different companies. So tell us, because they are all the others are now their current students, and then they are not moving, make this transition to the industry yet. So how do you feel? What's the overall feeling about working in the US as a professional?
Well, that's a great question. And my experience working in the US professional environment so far has been great most of the time. Of course, there were ups and downs, but one thing I'd like to mention is that, as someone who is working in a professional setting, you would have to always showcase your visibility. Everyone in your team, everyone in your company is often busy with their work, and how would they remember you? How would you impress your boss? Well, you talk more in the meetings, you ask more questions, you find potential problems and present it with a rationale. People will always remember who you are by doing this. And don't be afraid to speak up. There is no silly question, only silly answer. And this is the way for you to get up in the corporate ladder. And another tips that I would like to mention is that for students who want to build a career path in the US, having practical work experience through different internships is very effective to boost your chance to get into a job offer upon graduation. And it can also help you develop any professional skills to have any industry insights and build your network by doing this, by having more internships. And lastly, what I also want to highlight is that remember to be flexible and adaptable in your job search. Always considering job opportunities outside of your preferred location or industry, and be open to talking to different roles or responsibilities to gain more experience. You will have endless surprise by doing this, because you will broaden your perspective, broaden your mindset, and you will find out that there's a whole another area, there's a bigger sky after navigating that unknown area.
We're the only one who speak for ourselves. In order to make ourselves stand out, you just need to be proactive, and then just, yeah, that's really, really something very important. So I know that many students, especially international students, they had their previous internship experience or previous experiences in their home countries in which English may not be the first language. And not only Chinese students and students from maybe other countries in Europe, other countries in Asia, still facing the same situation. So as an international student yourself, so do you think this will be an disadvantage, this will be a disadvantage for international students to on their job searching, because majority of the US employers gonna look at their resume and then say, okay, this experience quite impressive, but not happen in the United States. So you speak from your own and then your real experience. Do you think it matters, or it's just not that matter that much?
Well, I think for first, it is true that many international students, they may not have previous professional experience in the US, but this does not necessarily mean that they are at a disadvantage at the job market. Just as I alluded earlier, we are marketers. We have to sell ourselves. How can we turn this into our niche, our uniqueness that many other may not have? And as far as I know, that many employers, US employers specifically, especially those who have APAC focused business or international business, they value international perspective, and they may be specifically looking to hire someone who has previous international working experience or multiple language skills, etc. And you can also emphasize your previous work experience and any accomplishments you've made during that experience. Also highlight your language skills and cultural fluency. They are the gem in many industry. And of course, I highly recommend international students to have US internships or even volunteer work in the US to have more insights and demonstrate your interest and your dedication to learn and grow in the US.
Karen, can I ask you to jump in a little bit to share your opinion about this question? Because I know that speak from the perspective of many US employers. Do you agree with what I just mentioned, that they would naturally consider this going to be a downside of students with without a solid internship experience or which happened in the US?
Mhm. So for you and for Greta, I do not believe that building your experience in your home country is a disadvantage. I also agree it is about how well you market yourself, using transferable skills, or as Greta had mentioned, picking up some experiences in the US. They don't have to be extensive experiences. You can do a project on campus. You can do a leadership role in an organization on campus. You can do volunteer work around Boston. It's really keeping mindful of what it is that you are looking to achieve by doing these experiences, so they can be added to your resume as part of those skills or values, or as Greta said, contributes to your niche in terms of where you want to go in your industry. The one thing that is a challenge is that we have an immediate bias when we look at people's names at the top of a resume. And it is unfortunate, but there are some assumptions that are made that if the name looks international, you would be requiring sponsorship. And so they can make a decision based on that. I do not recommend changing who you are, but just being aware of that. So I have seen, different approaches, reminding in a cover letter, if you're in the media sciences, that you're on a STEM 3-year OPT, if you're your regular 1-year OPT, or you have CPT. Unfortunately, it's kind of the ignorance of the employer, but something that I do believe we all have to be aware of. In terms of how we have that immediate visual bias when we are introduced to somebody or pick up some new piece of information. But I believe and I value the information, the experiences that students bring with them. And it's very important that we build on it rather than ignore it.
Great. Yeah, I totally agree. We build on it rather than ignore it. And then also a personal reminder, like personal tips, whatever. If a company is expressing possibly it's going to totally ignore your multilingual or multicultural background, that might not be a proper place for you to step your career path. So that cultural environment might not fitting you're just not fitting there. So that's maybe another accepted for you to consider. All right. Speaking about the sponsorship, we've mentioned this many times, and then especially for international students, it's all about H-1B eventually. So, Greta, I know that you've been through this hard process, and then I'm so glad that you successfully secured the jobs and then passed the H-1B lottery and then get what you wanted. And then let's just go back to last year at the same time, March. So I just wanted to share with us back to the beginning, how did you negotiate with your previous employer? First, with your first job employer, how to apply for H-1B sponsorship. And then I know this year you successfully transferred H-1B to the new companies. What does this process looks like? And just share with us the details.
Sure. During when I was searching for jobs, I have always made clear of my current status on the very first or second round of interviews. But the very, very beginning, before I even apply, I go to any online databases to check if they have a previous sponsorship record. Generally speaking, companies with a sponsorship record, they do have a higher chance of sponsoring you because they do know how to sponsor and they are willing to sponsor any job applicant. And just as I alluded before, during the interview process, I will reiterate my current status and the sponsorship requirements many times. And I often write them down in an email format and to send that to my employer. I let them know that without this sponsorship, I won't be joining a company. And I always let them to put it in my contract. and to see, and as you know, just for a legal purpose, because H1B lottery is a relatively tricky thing, because even if your employer say that they have already registered for you, they have already, you know, filled your application, but on your end, you wouldn't have known it, because H1B is facing only for the employer, and it's not for the job applicant. So at the same time, I also understand that miracle does happen. There are a lot of cases on social media that, you know, people talking about how they are the first one their company has ever sponsored them. And I do believe, and I truly feel happy for them. But for me, I am not a risk taker, and I do not have the time to, you know, bet for 1 year with them and eventually find out that they were not going to sponsor me. So what I'd like to highlight is that always search if they have a previous sponsorship record, and you can start from that.
How about the transfer this year?
Well, H1B transfer is generally a lot easier than H1B, you know, the initial application, the lottery system. But H1B transfer also requires a lot of time and dedication, because typically you are also starting like a new H1B application, but just without lottery process. So so for my new role, I also negotiated with the HR, and they have only had one case before me with their H1B application previously, but luckily they do know how to process that, and they do have an attorney team to help me with that process. And of course, they will cover all of my H1B application transfer fee with the attorney fee. Yeah.
So I heard from quite a few students express this concern to me before. It's like, Lou, should I bring up this H1B thing during my first round of interview? Because they just so scared that what if the employer knows that, okay, I need H1B visa, and they are going to pay for this entire process, and they were just turn me down immediately, and then not moving forward with the second round of interview, even though they know how good I will be. So what is your suggestion? Do you suggest the students to just bring this at the beginning of the entire process, or we should make it a little bit strategic move? What do you think?
Well, I think, well, of course, people have different perspectives on this matter, but as someone who only has 1 year of OPT, I don't recommend to have, you know, any strategic move, any strategic approach to any employer that, even if you think it that way, it's still like a waste of time and effort, because you only have 1 year, and within this year you have to tackle the employer, you have to successfully fill an H1B application. So even if an employer is not willing to sponsor you at the very initial process, at the very first stage, just move on to next stage, just move on to the next employer, excuse me, and to find the employer that are truly willing to help you with your whole H1B lottery and sponsorship. And that will also secure your application, H1B application.
I agree. I think I also want to add one more thing to what Greta mentioned. For students who graduate different part of the year. So Greta graduated in January, which only left her like less than 3 months before 2 months, I would say, really, to March the H1B lottery. So time was so intense for her. Well, if you graduate in May or even potentially August, then you may have a little bit longer time compared to Greta. And then that part you can consider which is your best option, and also consider a situation like Greta mentioned, and then did your research on the H1B sponsor database before you talk to this employer to see to get a general sense of the process, and then whether the company was familiar with the entire process, and then make a moving forward, which part you think would work best for you to bring these issues to an employer. So, okay, before I move into the Q&A part, Greta, is there any other thing, speak from your personal experience, you would like to suggest to future professionals who also wants to build a career path in the United States?
Well, I'd like to say that always start early with your job application. If you're graduating in January, as what I graduated last year, start in October, start in November, or even look at it in September, because I know companies are hiring like crazy in September, October timeframe. And if you are graduating in August, if you are graduating in May, start looking at it in January, in the beginning of the year, because typically in the beginning of the year, a lot of people, they get their bonus and they leave. So that leaves us with a lot of job vacancies in the companies. So start early, start to talk to people more, network with your peers on LinkedIn, on social media, network with who have successful career paths with the similar culture background as you are. Talk to them, get to know their experience, and just talk more, and don't be afraid to ask more questions. There's no silly question, only silly answer.
I learned one thing from you today is I will always remember there's no silly questions but silly answers. Karen,
Yeah.
I think this is so good, right?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much. Okay, next part is just a little bit wrap it up for all of you. You may already know it quite well. And then the career guide, which we also share on our career service website. And then career services, you can make an appointment with every staff member, student worker, and also Karen, and then on Handshake. If you want them to help you revise your LinkedIn profile, resume, cover letter, or even offer their insights and suggestions on how to do the networking, how to make a strategy for job searching, and then what stage they're currently in during your job searching. So make a handshake and talk to the staff member in the career service. And then, and then that will be a lot of useful resources over there. Now I'm opening up the floor and stop sharing my screen and welcome all questions. And then, thank you, our panelists for today. Let me just go ahead and stop sharing my screen. Question, concern, comments? Now is okay, Chu He.
So I have a question for Karen. So I totally agree that you say that your job description should be 100% matched with the requirement of the job. But how can you revise hundreds of resume when you are applying different kind of job? I mean, when I am applying just different types, some marketing, advertising, and communicator, coordinator, but they all have different job descriptions. So I just don't have enough time to revise everyone one by one, specifically match their demands. I feel like and I also don't have enough time this semester. So how can you handle this problem?
Mm-hmm. So as Greta said, part of the responsibility of a job search is to really do your homework and identify your niche. That means what do you have that's unique, but also to define what is your true interest. One of the things that happens when you're in a job search is that you feel you need to scatter the opportunities to cover the bases and cover the odds. That's actually not going to be helpful for the reason you just shared. It is very time consuming to do a job search and to do it well. Greta also said, start as early as possible. For those of you who are graduating in May, it's not too late, but you do want to try to start as early as possible. Part of the research I showed in my slide was to early on research your industry, identify the job titles that fit what you want to be when you're finished with your degree program, and become very familiar with what those descriptions include in terms of those transferable skills. When you look at it in that way, you will find that there's actually a lot more common than different. And so you will not be needing to make so many different resumes. What will happen is before you submit that resume to that particular job, you will take a quick review of it and to see if you have those synonyms. You know, do you have all the skill sets that they're looking for? Are they the lead statement on your bullets? And is there an opportunity to use a word that's from their description that means the same thing instead of the word you have on your resume, so that you have that keyword match? And it does not have to be 100%. Like I said, the worst thing I would want you to do is mislead by changing your resume too much. So with all the great advice that came from Greta's personal experience, it is important to do the research. It is important to identify your niche as a candidate, also the types of jobs you're looking for. And you will find more commonality when you're targeting what you truly want, rather than what we term shotgunning. I don't know if you're all familiar with that, but you know, a shotgun, when you shoot it, 100 pellets go in 100 different directions, versus a targeted shot, which is one shot in one direction. So we would like to see you brought in to less of a shotgun approach and have that targeted approach around all the definitions that you've created and determined for yourself. Does that help answer the question?
Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay.
I have another question for Tang. Is that okay? Yeah. So I want to ask you, like, how many resumes have you delivered before you find out your first job? And I know that so many people say that you need to kind of write down and remember every job you have applied, but I don't know, like, why does that matter? Like, I don't know why, like, they do this, because I just forgot all of the job I have applied, but I don't feel like, you know, it's really gonna influence anything. So yeah.
That's a great question. And I think to answer the first part of your question on how many resumes that I submitted to, you know, any positions available. Well, because for my first full-time job offer in the US, I don't quite remember the exact number, but I do remember it's that I submitted almost 100 of job application. And within that 100 of job application, 70, at around 70-ish of the employer, they have got back to me for a phone screening and just narrow down to the very final rounds. It's at around 10 or 8 of them. So, and by doing this, by having an Excel sheet to see, you know, who turned you down and what is your application status, you will have a bigger picture of your you know, application status as a whole. But at the same time, you will have a fuller understanding of this industry, how this industry is performing this year, and how would you know, how can you optimize yourself, you know, into a better job applicator moving forward, because you will know that, you know, for example, social media related job often turn me down, but, you know, PR coordinator related job or agency related job, they often invited me to the next round. So this just, you know, kind of help you to optimize yourself and to improve on your resume, improve your whole job application process, because by doing this more often, you will have, you know, it will save your time more and more of your efforts.
Thank you very much. Yeah, kind of understand why I doing this right now. Thank you.
And it's not time consuming, just, you know, after you apply for a job, just to write down on an Excel sheet. It won't take you more than 2 minutes. So yeah.
Yeah, I got it.
Any other questions, comments, concerns? Yes?
Yeah, hi, Tom. This is Tiando. So I'm right now pretty much at a bottleneck of my interview process. I have interviewed with some of my target companies, and from my view, it went not bad, but they did not really move forward with me in the end. So my question would be, how did you digest and review or reflect on the interviews that didn't work at the end? Like, how do you benefit from them and learn from this process?
Well, that's a great question. And first of all, I do think that every interview process, every stage of interview is a learning moment for you to reflect upon. And even, if you are in the very final round of the interviews, you get to talk to, very senior people from the team that you will be working for. If you got hired, for example, the senior vice president or like the director or just the account executive or just your manager, you will know from the moment that you start speaking and once you reflect upon, you will know that, okay, I am stuttered in this part. My brain went blank in this part. And what I do think is really important is that always to seek feedback from the HR, because I know a lot of the companies, if they do have a really good HR person, they will provide you with their senior level of feedback if they, turn you down eventually. And if they do not get back to you regarding their feedback, just ask them, because no silly questions, only silly answers. And I do get a lot of constructive feedback when I started my application process from a lot of HR. One of the HR from BCW Global, which is a very good PR agency, she got back to me and she said, next time you speak, just think before you speak, even if you are saying it a bit slower than you typically do, but always have that constructive mindset before you speak to people. That is also very important in our job application. So I think is to always reach out and always have a time to reflect, because every interview is a learning moment for you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
I just want to jump in for one thing. We're human beings, and so we do have bad days. so be proactive to ensure that you're in the best space possible for that interview. Okay. So for example, if you're sitting here in Boston, you have a video interview at 10 o'clock and it's your second round, and there's been some sort of, massive snowstorm, or the MBTA isn't working again, or, whatever. Try to be as proactive as possible to let the person coordinating your interview know that beyond your ability, your situation has changed and you are not going to be available for 10 o'clock. Could you reschedule for 2 o'clock or something like that? Same thing if you wake up and you're sick. It is very difficult to be on your top of game if you're running a fever or if you're doubled over in pain. So don't try to muscle through an interview. It's too important to risk. So please remember that the interview process, as much as you feel that the applicant is kind of the employer definitely owns the whole thing, I'm going to say that, but you are an adult engaging with another adult, and this does show your communication skills. It does show how you prepared to represent and present yourself, and just be your first advocate. Okay, you are the only one advocating for yourself. Everybody else is on the employer side. So just keep that in mind. Too many students have lost an opportunity because they thought they could muscle through the interview. So I don't recommend that. If something happens in an interview and you realize it went horribly wrong, reach out to your contact who organized it and have an honest conversation. It happened to me with my first professional job. I thought I could muscle through the interview, but I was distracted because I had my dissertation that afternoon. I should never have scheduled that interview before a dissertation. No way. And it did not work. But I called the person who coordinated it for me. She said, thank you for calling, because people who met you before were shocked at how different you were this time. And they gave me another chance and I got the job. So remember, advocate for yourself. You are a professional, you are an adult. This does demonstrate communication skills. It does demonstrate how you would handle yourself in a work environment. It's all good.
Thank you so much, Karen. It's really helpful. Okay, everyone, I really need to close the panel today as our panelists needs to go work. So if you have any other questions, I will be sharing the slides and then recording to all of you later. And then the recording will also be published on Com's YouTube channel later. So feel free to reach out if you have any other questions. I send you the Greta's LinkedIn profile. Feel free to make connections. So I hope everybody best of luck during your job searching. And then thanks again so much. Thanks again so much for our two outstanding panelists today, and then Karen and Greta. I really appreciate your time, everyone. And then best of luck on job searching, and then just keep in touch. All right. Bye, everyone. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, Greta.
Bye.
Take care. Bye, Greta.